Welcome to my channel Bookish English. I am Ariel. If you feel something inside you, stop when it is time to speak English. If your heart beats faster, your mind goes empty, and the words you already know refuse to come out, then this video is not just for you. This video is about you. You are not weak. You are not slow. You are simply stuck in the wrong way of learning, and today that changes. In the next few minutes, you are going to experience a shift. Not just learn new sentences, but change the way you think, the way you respond, and the way you see yourself when you speak. You will understand why you freeze, how to break that pattern, and how to speak even when you feel nervous. You will learn how to stay in control when you do not understand, how to answer with confidence, and how to move forward without waiting to be perfect. I am not going to promise you magic. I am going to show you something better. A real method, a real mindset, a real transformation that you can start using immediately. If you stay with me till the end, you will not be the same learner who clicked this video. You will become someone who speaks, someone who tries, someone who moves forward without fear. This is your turning point. Stay with me. Chapter 1. The Dream Feels Real. I am Ariel, and I still remember the day I started planning my journey to New York. It did not feel like a normal day. It felt like the beginning of something important. I was sitting in my room with my passport in my hand and my ticket on the table, and for the first time, I understood that this was real. I was not just thinking about going to another country. I was actually going. I was going to live, study, and speak in English, not inside my room, but in the real world. At that time, I was a student of English, not a fluent speaker. I could understand some things, I could speak a little, but I was not confident. Inside my room I felt strong, because I could think slowly and repeat my sentences. But deep inside, I had a fear that I did not tell anyone. I was afraid of real conversations. I was afraid that when someone spoke fast English, I would understand nothing. I was afraid that my mind would go empty at the wrong moment. I remember standing in front of the mirror and looking at myself for a long time. I wanted to feel confident, but I could see the nervousness in my own eyes. Then I said softly, "I am Ariel. I am a student. I am going to New York." My voice was not strong, but it was clear. I said it again, a little louder this time. Then again. Slowly, I started to feel a small change inside me. That was the first lesson I learned before my journey even started. Do not try to sound perfect. Try to sound clear. I went back to my table and opened my notebook. It was not a big notebook, but it was very important to me. It had simple sentences that I practiced every day. I did not fill it with difficult grammar or long vocabulary lists. I filled it with sentences that I knew I would need in real life. This line followed. My name is Ariel. I am traveling for study. Can you please repeat that? Can you speak slowly? I do not understand. Thank you for your help. I read those sentences again and again. At that moment, I understood something that changed my thinking. I did not need perfect English to survive. I needed useful English. This idea made me feel lighter. It removed a lot of pressure from my mind. Then I did something very important. I started speaking aloud, not in my head, but with my voice. I stood up, looked in the mirror, and imagined that someone was standing in front of me. I spoke slowly, with small pauses. Hello, my name is Ariel. I am going to New York. This is my passport. Please help me. At first it felt strange. My voice was not smooth. My sentences were simple, but I did not stop. I repeated them again and again. After some time, I noticed something. My mouth was moving more naturally. My fear was becoming smaller. This is one of the best practices I learned. If you want to speak English in real life, you must practice speaking in real life, even if you are alone. After that, I started walking around my room and naming things in English. Door, bag, phone, shoes, passport. Then I made small sentences. This is my bag. I need my passport. My phone is here. These sentences were simple, but they were real. They were part of my life. That made them powerful. I realized that English is not only a subject, it is a tool, and the more you connect it to your real life, the easier it becomes. Then I checked my documents carefully. Passport, visa, ticket, admission letter, and the address where I would stay in New York. I placed everything in a folder. While doing this, I thought about something important. In many situations, I may not understand everything people say, but I can still communicate. I can show my documents. I can point. I can use simple words. This thought gave me confidence. Communication is not only about perfect speaking. It is about finding a way to express yourself. As the time to leave came closer, my heart started beating faster. I was excited, but I was also afraid. I did not try to remove the fear completely. Instead, I accepted it. I told myself, it is okay to feel nervous. It means this is important. When I left my room, I looked back for a moment. That small room was the place where I learned my first English sentences. That was the place where I made mistakes without fear. Now, I was going to use that English in the real world. During the ride to the airport, I did not open any new lesson. I did not try to learn new difficult words. Instead, I practiced real situations in my mind. I imagined someone asking me, "Why are you going to New York?" And I answered, "I am going to study." I imagined someone asking, "Is this your first time?" And I replied, "Yes, it is my first time." This kind of practice helped me feel prepared. It trained my mind to respond quickly and simply. This is another best practice. Do not only learn English, imagine using it. As I looked outside the window, I saw the city lights moving quickly. My thoughts were also moving. My fear was still there, but something else was growing stronger. Courage. Then I reminded myself of a simple truth that I want you to remember too. Mistakes are not the problem. Silence is the problem. If you stay silent, you will never improve. But if you speak, even with mistakes, you will learn faster than you think. When I reached the airport and saw the big building in front of me, I took a deep breath. This was the moment, the beginning of my real journey. I held my bag firmly and started walking toward the entrance. I was not perfect, but I was ready to speak. Chapter 2. Embassy Window. Fear. The airport lights were still fresh in my eyes, and the weight of the journey had already begun to settle inside me. My steps were steady, but my thoughts were not. By the time I reached the embassy building, the excitement from the first chapter had quietly turned into something sharper. This was not imagination anymore. This was the first real test of my English, and it was happening face to face with someone who expected clear answers. The building stood tall and serious, and the people around me looked focused, each one carrying their own story, their own hope, and their own fear. Some spoke confidently in English, and hearing them made my mind start comparing. Their sentences sounded smooth. Their voices sounded natural. For a moment, I felt small. I felt like I was not ready. But then, I reminded myself of something simple and powerful. I was not here to impress anyone. I was here to communicate. I held my folder a little tighter and walked inside. The waiting area was quiet, but my mind was loud. Every second felt longer than usual. I watched others go to the counter one by one. Some smiled when they came back. Some looked serious. I could not read their results, but I could feel the pressure building inside me. My hands felt slightly cold. My heart was beating faster than normal. This is what real pressure feels like, and this is where many learners lose control. Then my name was called. I stood up, took a slow breath, and walked toward the counter. My steps were not perfect, but they were forward. I greeted politely and looked at the officer. That small action gave me a little control over the situation. "Good morning." The officer looked at me calmly and asked the first question. "Why are you going to New York?" It was a simple question. I had practiced it many times. But in that moment, my mind went blank for a second. This is something that happens to many learners. When pressure comes, memory becomes slow. But instead of panicking, I paused for a very short moment and remembered my strategy. Keep it simple. Speak clearly. "I am going to study." That was enough. No long explanation, no complicated structure, just a clear answer. The officer nodded and asked another question. "What will you study?" This time, I was a little faster. "I will study English." My voice was not perfect, but it was stable. I realized something important right there. Speaking slowly is not a weakness. It is control. Then the officer asked something a little faster, and I did not understand every word. This was the moment I had feared the most. My mind tried to guess the answer, but I stopped myself. Guessing can create bigger problems. Instead, I used a sentence that I had practiced again and again. "Sorry, could you repeat the question?" The officer repeated it, a little slower this time, and suddenly everything became clear. That one sentence saved me. That one sentence gave me confidence again. This is one of the strongest habits you can build. When you do not understand, ask again. Do not stay silent. Do not guess blindly. Take control of the conversation. The questions continued, and each one felt like a small challenge. Where will you stay? Who will support you? How long will you study? I did not try to sound advanced. I focused on being direct and honest. I will stay at this address. My family will support me. I will study for 1 year. Short sentences, clear meaning, no confusion. At one point, I made a small mistake. I felt it immediately. My mind wanted to go back and fix it, but I kept going. I did not stop. I did not apologize again and again. I continued speaking. That was another lesson. Do not break your flow for small mistakes. Most people understand your meaning even if your grammar is not perfect. I also became aware of my body. I stood straight. I kept my shoulders relaxed. I looked at the officer, not at the floor. Even when I felt nervous, I did not show it too much. Body language supports your words. Even simple English sounds stronger when your posture is confident. With every answer, something inside me was changing. The fear was not disappearing completely, but it was losing its power. I was not running away anymore. I was responding. I was participating. I was using English in real life. After a few minutes, the officer gave a small nod, and the conversation ended. I stepped away from the counter and walked out slowly. For a moment, I just stood outside the building, feeling everything at once. Relief, pride, energy. I had just faced one of my biggest fears, and I did not fail. I did not freeze. I did not stay silent. As I walked away, I understood something deeply. Confidence does not come before speaking. Confidence comes after you speak. After you try, after you survive a real situation. If you are thinking about your own journey, remember this. You do not need perfect English to pass moments like this. You need simple preparation, calm thinking, and the courage to speak even when your voice feels weak. Practice your key sentences. Speak aloud before the real moment. Learn to ask for repetition. Stay slow and clear. Do not rush to sound fluent. Focus on being understood. That day, I did not become perfect, but I became stronger, and that strength stayed with me as I moved forward into the next challenge. Chapter 3: First Airport Test. The moment I walked through the main doors of the airport, I felt something change inside me. It was not just the environment. It was the speed, the sound, the pressure. Everything was moving, and I had to move with it. People were walking fast with confidence. Announcements were playing again and again in English. Screens were full of information. Counters were busy. For a few seconds, I just stood there and looked around, trying to understand where to go, but my mind felt slower than everything around me. I told myself to stop, not stop walking, but stop panicking. I took a slow breath and remembered something very important. I do not need to understand everything. I only need to understand what is important. That one thought helped me focus again. I looked at my ticket. I found the check-in counter number. I started walking toward it, even though I was not fully confident. Movement is important. When you keep moving, your fear becomes smaller. As I stood in the line for check-in, I listened carefully to the conversations happening in front of me. I could not understand every word, but I started catching patterns. I heard words like passport, ticket, luggage, window, and aisle. This was a powerful moment. I realized that listening does not mean understanding everything. Listening means catching key words and building meaning from them. When my turn came, my heart started beating faster again. I walked to the counter, smiled politely, and said, "Hello." That small greeting helped me feel a little more in control. The staff member asked something quickly, and I only understood part of it. For a second, I felt that old fear again, the fear of not understanding. But this time, I did not stay silent. I said, "Sorry, this is my first time. Can you please help me?" That sentence changed everything. The staff member's tone became softer. The speed became slower. Suddenly, the situation felt easier. This is one of the best lessons I learned that day. When you show honesty, people respond with kindness. You do not need to hide your level. You can use it as your strength. The staff asked about my luggage, and I showed my bag and said, "This bag only." I did not try to create a long sentence. I used what I had, clear and simple. Then came a question that confused me. Window or aisle? I heard the words, but I was not fully sure about the meaning. For a moment, I thought about guessing, but I stopped myself. Guessing can create problems. So I asked directly, "Window or aisle means?" The staff smiled and pointed to the airplane layout. One side was near the window, and the other was near the passage. I understood immediately and answered, "Window, please." That small moment gave me confidence. I did not know the answer at first, but I asked, I learned, and I responded. That is real communication. After check-in, I moved toward the security area. This part was different because there was less talking and more action. People were placing their bags on the belt, removing items, and walking through scanners. I watched carefully. I did not rush. I copied what others were doing. Observation is also a powerful skill. When you do not understand everything, you can still learn by watching. When it was my turn, I followed the steps. I placed my bag, removed what I needed, and waited. A security officer gave a short instruction, and I did not catch every word, but I understood the action from his gesture. I followed it, and everything went smoothly. At that moment, I realized something important. Communication is not only words, it is also actions, gestures, and understanding situations. This thought made me feel stronger. After security, I entered a large waiting area. There were many gates, many screens, and many people. This was another challenge. I looked at my ticket again and searched for my gate number on the screen. The information was there, but I had to focus to find it. Numbers, letters, destinations, times. It felt like a test of attention. I found my gate, but I was still not fully confident. So I decided to confirm. I walked to a nearby staff member and asked, "This gate correct for New York?" The staff member looked at my ticket and said, "Yes, this is correct." That one confirmation removed a lot of stress. This is another important lesson. When you are not sure, ask. A simple question can save you from big confusion. As I sat near the gate, I listened to announcements. They were still fast, and I could not understand everything, but I started focusing on key words again. Flight, New York, boarding passengers, gate. These words became my anchors. I did not need full understanding. I needed enough understanding. Time passed, and slowly, I started feeling more comfortable in the environment. The airport was still busy, still loud, still fast, but I was not frozen anymore. I was part of the movement. I was observing, asking, responding, and learning. Then came another small moment. A passenger sitting next to me asked something simple. I did not catch the full sentence, but I heard "first time" and "New York." I smiled and answered, "Yes, first time. I am a little nervous." The passenger smiled back and said something encouraging. I did not understand every word, but I understood the feeling. That small interaction made me feel human again, not just a learner. I looked around once more, and this time everything felt a little different. The same airport, the same people, the same sounds, but I had changed. I was not perfect, but I was active. I was not silent. I was learning in real time. This was my first real test, and I did not pass it perfectly, but I passed it honestly, and that is what matters. Chapter 4: English Above the Clouds. When I finally stepped into the airplane and found my seat, I felt a quiet relief for a moment, as if I had completed something important just by reaching this point. But that feeling did not stay for long, because a new kind of challenge was waiting for me here. The airport had movement and noise, but the airplane had something different. It had closeness. I was now sitting between strangers, surrounded by English in a space where I could not easily step away. The seat felt small, the sounds felt clearer, and every voice around me felt closer to my ears. I placed my bag carefully, sat down, and looked around, trying to understand what would happen next. But my mind was still adjusting to this new environment. The flight attendants began speaking, giving instructions about safety, seat belts, and emergency procedures. Their English was clear, but fast, and for a moment, I tried to understand every word, but it quickly became difficult. Then I remembered something important. I do not need to understand everything, isn't it? I need to understand what is necessary. I looked at the actions instead of focusing only on the words. People around me were fastening their seatbelts, checking their seats, and following instructions. I copied them calmly, This was a powerful lesson in real life. When words feel fast, actions can guide you. Communication is not only listening, it is also observing and adapting. After the airplane settled, I felt a small silence inside me, but it was not complete silence. It was filled with thoughts. What if someone talks to me? What if I do not understand? What if I cannot answer? These questions were still there, but I was no longer running away from them. I was sitting with them, ready to face them if they came. After some time, the person sitting next to me turned slightly and smiled. That small smile felt like the beginning of something important. Then came the moment I had imagined many times. He asked me a simple question, but it still felt like a test. His words were clear, but natural, not slow like practice videos. For a second, I needed to process what he said, and I caught the main idea. He was asking if it was my first time traveling. I could have stayed silent. I could have pretended not to understand, but I chose to speak. Yes, it is my first time, I said, slowly but clearly. My voice was not perfect, but it was real. He smiled again and said something more, and this time I did not catch every word, but I understood enough to respond. I realized that communication is not about perfect understanding. It is about enough understanding to continue the conversation. I answered in simple words, and he responded kindly. There was no judgment. There was no pressure. Just a normal human interaction. That moment changed something inside me. I had always thought that I needed perfect English to speak with others. But now I understood that effort matters more than perfection. When you try, people meet you halfway. After some time, a flight attendant came to ask about food and drinks. This was another small but important moment. She asked something, and I heard options, but I was not completely sure about all of them. Instead of guessing, I asked politely, "Can you say that again, please?" She repeated it, a little slower, and this time I understood. I made my choice and said, "Water, please." This was a simple interaction, but it gave me confidence. I did not stay silent. I did not pretend. I asked, I understood, and I responded. This is one of the best habits you can build. Ask when you do not understand. It keeps the conversation alive. As the flight continued, I started to feel more comfortable with the environment. The fear was still there, but it was no longer controlling me. I was learning how to exist in English, not perfectly, but actively. I looked around and noticed that everyone was focused on their own journey. No one was watching me closely. No one was judging every word I said. This realization gave me freedom. Many times, our fear is bigger in our mind than in reality. There was another moment when an announcement came, and I could not understand everything. For a second, I felt confused, but then I looked around. No one was reacting in a serious way. People stayed calm. That told me something important. Not every announcement needs a reaction. Sometimes, it is okay not to understand everything immediately. I stayed calm and waited. Soon, the situation became clear through context and action. As I sat there, high above the clouds, I thought about my journey so far. I had spoken in the embassy. I had survived the airport. I was now speaking inside the airplane. These were not big conversations, but they were real conversations. They were steps forward. I also started practicing quietly in my mind. I repeated sentences I had used. I improved them slightly. I imagined new situations. This kind of mental practice helped me stay active even while sitting. It kept my mind connected to English. One important thing I learned during the flight was this: do not wait for the perfect moment to speak. The perfect moment does not exist. You create the moment by choosing to speak, even when you feel unsure. As the flight moved closer to its destination, I felt something new inside me. It was not full confidence, but it was growing confidence. I was not the same person who stood in front of the mirror at home. I had used English in real situations, and that experience had changed me. The clouds outside the window looked calm and endless, and for the first time, I felt a similar calm inside myself. I was still learning. I was still making mistakes, but I was moving forward, and that was enough. Chapter 5: Landing into Confusion. When the airplane finally touched the ground, I felt a wave of relief move through my body. But that feeling did not stay for long, because a new kind of challenge was already waiting for me. The journey in the air had given me some confidence, but the moment I stepped out of the airplane, everything changed again. The airport in New York was larger, louder, and faster than anything I had experienced before. People were moving quickly in different directions. Announcements were happening again and again, and I could hear English from every side. But this time it felt more natural, more real, and also more difficult to follow. As I walked toward immigration, I tried to stay calm, but inside, my mind was working hard. This was not just a place to walk through. This was a place where I had to answer questions clearly. I joined the line and watched others carefully. Some people were speaking confidently. Some were answering quickly. I tried to listen, but the voices were fast, and I could not understand everything. For a moment, the old fear came back. What if I do not understand the officer? What if I make a mistake here? I stopped those thoughts before they could grow. I reminded myself of everything I had already done. I had spoken at the embassy. I had handled the airport. I had spoken inside the airplane. I was not starting from zero anymore. I was learning step by step. When it was my turn, I walked forward and greeted politely. The officer looked at my passport and asked questions. His voice was clear, but still fast for me. I focused on the main words. I did not try to understand every small detail. He asked about my purpose, and I answered simply, "I am here to study." He asked where I would stay, and I showed the address written on my paper, while also saying it slowly. This was a very useful action. When speaking feels difficult, showing written information can support your words. It makes communication easier. At one point, he asked something that I did not fully understand. I felt that small moment of confusion again, but this time, I did not panic. I said politely, "Sorry, could you repeat that?" He repeated it, and this time I understood enough to answer. That one habit, asking again, kept helping me again and again. It gave me control over situations that once felt impossible. After immigration, I moved toward the baggage claim area. This place felt like a moving puzzle. There were many screens, many belts, and many people waiting. I checked the screen carefully and found my flight number. Then I walked to the correct belt and waited. While waiting, I listened to conversations around me. I could understand a little more now than before, but still not everything. Instead of feeling frustrated, I focused on progress. Even a small improvement matters. When my bag finally arrived, I felt a small victory. It may sound simple, but in a new country, even small tasks feel big. I took my bag and moved toward the exit, but the journey was not over yet. I still had to pass through customs and then find a way to reach my place. At customs, I followed what others were doing. I observed carefully and stayed calm. The officer asked a few simple questions, and I answered clearly. I noticed something important again. Short answers work. Clear answers work. You do not need long explanations to communicate. After that, I stepped out into the main arrival area, and this is where the real confusion began. The space was large, filled with people, signs, and different options for transportation. Taxi, train, bus, shuttle. Everything was written in English, but there were so many choices that my mind felt overloaded. I stood there for a moment, holding my bag, trying to decide what to do next. This is a very real moment for many travelers. You know English, but when too many things happen at once, it becomes difficult to think clearly. I felt that pressure, but I did not let it stop me. I chose one simple action: ask for help. I walked to an information desk and said, "Excuse me, how can I go to this address?" I showed the paper with the address written on it. The person looked at it and started explaining. The explanation was a little fast, and I could not catch everything, but I listened for key words. Train, line, stop, taxi. Then I asked another simple question. "Can you write it, please?" That changed everything. The person wrote the directions on a paper, and now I had something clear to follow. This is one of the best strategies I learned. When listening becomes difficult, ask for written help. It reduces confusion and gives you confidence. I decided to take a taxi because it felt easier for my first day. I walked to the taxi area and waited in line. When it was my turn, I showed the address to the driver and said, "Please take me here." He nodded, and we started moving. As the car moved through the city, I looked outside the window. The buildings were tall, the streets were busy, and everything felt alive. This was New York, the city I had imagined for years. But now I was not just looking at it, I was inside it. The driver asked me something, and I did not understand fully. Instead of staying silent, I said, "Sorry, I am new here. Can you say again?" He repeated it in a simpler way, and I understood. This small interaction showed me something important again. When you show that you are learning, many people become more patient. As the journey continued, I started feeling a mix of emotions. I was tired, but I was also proud. I had faced many situations already, and I had not stopped. I had made mistakes, but I had kept going. When we finally reached my destination, I paid the driver and said, "Thank you." It was a simple sentence, but it felt meaningful. I had used English in real life, again and again, in different situations, and I had survived. As I stood there with my bag, looking at my new surroundings, I realized something deeply. Real English is not clean and slow like lessons. It is fast, imperfect, and full of surprises. But that does not mean you cannot handle it. You can. One question at a time, one sentence at a time, one step at a time. And that is how confusion slowly becomes confidence. Chapter 6. A City That Speaks Fast. The first full day in the city began with a quiet determination. But it did not stay quiet for long. The moment I stepped outside, I felt the real rhythm of New York. People were already moving quickly. Conversations were happening everywhere. Cars were passing, horns were sounding, and English was flowing from every direction. This was not the controlled environment of an airplane or a counter. This was the real world, and it was not slowing down for me. As I started walking, I noticed something immediately. People here do not speak like in learning videos. Their sentences are shorter, faster, and sometimes not complete. They use expressions I had never heard before. They join words together. They speak without pauses. For a moment, It felt like I knew nothing. That feeling can be very heavy for a learner. You think you studied, but suddenly everything feels new again. I decided to do something important. I stopped trying to understand everything. Instead, I started focusing on key words. This was a big shift in my thinking. I realized that in a fast environment, you do not need to understand every single word. You need to catch the main idea. Words like directions, places, numbers, and actions became my focus. I walked into a small store to buy water, and when I reached the counter, the cashier said something quickly. I only caught one word: cash. For a second, I felt confused, but then I understood the situation. He was asking how I would pay. Cash, I replied. That was enough. The conversation did not need to be perfect. It only needed to work. As I walked further, I decided to ask for directions to a nearby place. I approached a person and said, "Excuse me, how can I go to this place?" I showed the name on my phone. The person answered quickly, using many words I could not fully catch, but I heard important one. Left street, block, right. I focused only on those words. I did not try to understand everything else. Then I asked, left, then right, to confirm. Yes, left, then right, the person said. That confirmation gave me clarity. This is a powerful method. When answers are fast, repeat the key idea in a simple way to confirm. It reduces confusion and builds confidence. As I continued walking, I realized something deeper. The problem was not that my English was too weak. The problem was that I was expecting perfect understanding in an imperfect environment. Real English is not slow. It is not always clear. It is fast, natural, and sometimes messy. Once I accepted this, my stress reduced. I entered another place, a small cafe, to try ordering something. This was another real test. The menu was in English, but it had many words I did not know. I looked at it carefully and chose something simple. When it was my turn, the person at the counter asked something quickly. I heard "for here" or "to go," but I was not sure. Instead of guessing, I said, "Sorry, can you say that again?" The person repeated, a little slower, "For here" or "to go." I understood and answered, "For here." That was enough. The order was complete. The situation was solved. In that moment, I felt a small success, but it was very important. I was not silent. I was not guessing blindly. I was asking, understanding, and responding. This is active learning. This is how real progress happens. As I sat there with my coffee, I listened to conversations around me. People were talking about daily life, work, study, and plans. Their English was natural, fast, and full of expressions. I could not understand everything, but I could understand some parts, and that was enough. I reminded myself again that progress is not about full understanding. It is about increasing understanding over time. Later, I decided to take public transport. This was another challenge. The system looked complex, and the announcements were fast. I stood there, looking at the signs, trying to match them with my destination. I asked a person nearby, "This train goes to this place?" and showed the name. "Yes, this one," they said. That simple confirmation helped me move forward. I got on the train and listened carefully to the stops. I could not understand every announcement clearly, but I recognized the names I had seen on the map. This is another important strategy. Connect what you hear with what you see. It helps your brain build understanding. During the day, I had many small interactions. Some were easy, some were confusing, but I did not stop. Every time I did not understand, I used simple tools. I asked again, I confirmed, I watched, I listened for key words, I stayed calm. At one point, someone spoke to me very fast, and I could not understand anything. For a second, I felt that old fear again. But instead of staying silent, I said, I am still learning English. Can you speak slowly? The person smiled and repeated in a simpler way. That moment showed me something very important. When you are honest about your level, people often become more helpful. By the end of the day, I was tired, but it was a different kind of tired. It was not frustration, it was growth. My brain had worked hard. My ears had worked hard. My confidence had grown, step by step. I looked back at the day and realized how much I had done. I had spoken with strangers. I had asked for directions. I had ordered food. I had used transport. None of it was perfect, but all of it was real. This city speaks fast, but that does not mean you cannot learn from it. You just need to change how you listen. You do not need to catch every word. You need to catch the meaning. And once you start doing that, the fast world becomes a little slower, a little clearer, and a lot more possible. Chapter 7. My first campus conversation. The next real step of my journey began when I entered the university campus for the first time. This moment felt very different from everything I had experienced before. This was not just about travel anymore. This was the place where I had to live, study, and communicate every single day in English. As I walked through the campus, I could see students talking in groups. They were laughing, discussing, asking questions. Everything was happening in English, fast and natural. For a moment, I felt like I was standing outside a world that I wanted to enter but did not fully understand yet. This feeling was not just fear, it was also pressure. Here, I could not just survive for a few minutes like at the airport or in a taxi. Here, I had to continue speaking, listening, and understanding again and again. I walked slowly toward the main office because I needed to complete my registration. Even this simple task felt like a challenge, not because the process was difficult, but because it required communication. Communication in English still felt heavy inside me. When I reached the reception desk, I paused for a second. I took a deep breath. I reminded myself of the same rule that had helped me so many times already. Keep it simple. Stay calm. Speak clearly. Then I said, "Hello. I am new here. I need help with registration." Those simple words opened the door. The receptionist looked at me and responded kindly. Even though I did not understand every word she said, I understood enough to follow the next step. That was enough. She gave me a form. As I looked at it, I realized something important. Understanding written English and speaking English are two different things. The form had words that I knew, but in that moment, they felt difficult because I was under pressure. Instead of feeling confused silently, I decided to ask, "Can you help me with this?" That question made everything easier. She explained the parts slowly. I filled the form step by step. This was a very important lesson for me. Asking for help is not a weakness. It is a smart action that saves time and reduces stress. After completing the form, I needed to find my classroom. The campus was large. There were many buildings, many directions, many signs. Even though everything was written in English, I still felt unsure. So I approached a student nearby and said, "Excuse me, where is this classroom?" I showed the room number. The student replied quickly. The directions felt a little fast for me. Instead of trying to understand everything, I focused on key words. Second floor, left hall. Then I confirmed by repeating, second floor, then left. The student said, yes. That confirmation gave me confidence to move forward. As I walked toward the classroom, I realized something very important. Campus English is not about perfect grammar. It is about daily communication, asking questions, understanding answers, continuing conversation. When I entered the classroom, I saw other students already sitting and talking. For a moment, I felt that old hesitation again. Should I speak or stay quiet? Should I try or wait? Then I remembered my journey so far. Every step I had taken came from speaking, not from staying silent. I sat down. After a few minutes, the student next to me turned and said something simple. Hi, is this your first class? Even though the sentence was easy, it still felt like a test. But this time, I did not feel frozen. I felt ready. I answered, yes, it is my first class. I am new here. That small response started a conversation. Not a long one, not a perfect one, but a real one. And that was enough. We spoke for a few minutes, slowly, with pauses, with small mistakes, but with understanding. I realized that communication is not about speaking without mistakes. It is about continuing even with mistakes. The other student did not judge me, did not correct every word, just listened and responded. That made me feel comfortable. As the class started, I listened carefully. I did not understand everything, but I understood the main ideas. I started writing notes in simple English. I did not try to write perfect sentences. I tried to capture meaning. This helped me stay active. This helped me stay connected. Right. By the end of the day, I felt something different inside me. Not just tired, but proud. I had entered a new environment and I did not stay silent. I asked questions. I asked for help. I spoke with others. I understood enough to move forward. This is the real goal. Not perfection, but participation. That day, I understood something clearly. The classroom is not a place where you need perfect English. It is a place where you grow your English. Step by step, sentence by sentence, conversation by conversation. Once you accept that, the fear becomes smaller, and the learning becomes stronger. Chapter 8. When silence feels heavy. That night, when everything became quiet, I finally felt the weight of the whole day. The city was still alive outside. The sounds were still there. But inside my room, there was a different kind of silence. It was not peaceful. It was heavy. I sat on the bed and looked at nothing for a few minutes. My body was tired. My mind was even more tired. I had spoken English all day. I had listened all day. I had tried again and again. Now, everything was coming back to me. I started replaying my conversations in my head, every sentence, every mistake, every pause. I remembered the moment when I could not understand the directions clearly. I remembered the moment when I answered slowly in class. I remembered the small hesitation before speaking. These thoughts did not come softly. They came strongly. They made me question myself. Why did I say that? Why was I so slow? Why is my English still not good enough? These questions felt real. They felt personal. And this is something many learners do not talk about. The real struggle is not only outside, it is inside. It is in your thoughts. It is in your feelings. It is in the way you judge yourself after every conversation. For a moment, I felt like becoming silent. I felt like avoiding conversations the next day. I felt like staying in my comfort zone. This is a very dangerous point, not because your English is weak, but because your confidence is shaking. I stayed quiet for some time. Then I did something that changed everything. I spoke to myself. Not loudly, not perfectly, but honestly. And I am learning. I am improving. I am not perfect, but I am not the same. These sentences were simple, but they were powerful. They were not for grammar practice. They were for emotional strength. I realized that learning English is not only about vocabulary and grammar. It is also about how you treat yourself during the journey. I stood up and walked slowly around my room. I looked at my bag, my books, my phone. Everything around me was part of my new life. I started describing things in English again, just like I did at home. This is my bag. I am tired today. I learned many things. I spoke English. These sentences felt different now. They were not practice. They were real. They came from my experience. That made them stronger. Then I sat down again and thought about my day. But this time, I changed my focus. Instead of thinking about my mistakes, I thought about my action. I spoke at the campus. I asked for help. I started a conversation. I understood many things. This shift in thinking changed my feeling. My mistakes were still there, but they were no longer the center. My effort became the center, and effort is what builds progress. I also realized something very important. My problem was not that I could not speak. My problem was that I wanted to speak perfectly. That expectation was too heavy. It was slowing me down. It was creating fear. When I removed that expectation, speaking became easier. I decided to practice again, but not like before. This time, I practiced real situations from my day. I imagined the same conversations, but I improved my responses slowly. Excuse me, can you help me? I am looking for this classroom. Can you explain this again? I understand a little. This kind of practice felt powerful. It was not random. It was connected to my real life. This is one of the best methods. Practice what you need. Practice what you use. Do not practice what you never say. As the night became deeper, I felt calmer. The heavy silence started to change. It became lighter. It became more peaceful. I understood something very clearly in that moment. Silence is not the enemy. Negative silence is the enemy. When silence is filled with doubt, it becomes heavy. When silence is filled with reflection, it becomes growth. I chose the second one. Before sleeping, I said a few more sentences to myself. Slowly, clearly. I will speak again tomorrow. I will try again. I will not stop. These sentences were not just words, they were decisions. I lay down and closed my eyes. My mind was still active, but it was no longer attacking me. It was supporting me. It was reminding me that every learner feels this. Every learner struggles, every learner doubts, but not every learner continues. That night, I made a quiet promise to myself. I will not let fear make me silent. I will not let mistakes stop me. I will keep speaking. I will keep learning. I will keep moving. Because the real failure is not slow English. The real failure is stopping. And I was not going to stop. Chapter 9. Small talks build confidence. The next few days did not feel as heavy as before. Something inside me had shifted quietly, and I could feel it in the way I walked, in the way I looked at people, and in the way I prepared myself before speaking. I was still not fluent. I still made mistakes, but now I was not afraid of starting conversations. That was the real change. I understood that confidence does not come from knowing everything. It comes from using what you already know. again and again, until it feels natural. That morning, I decided to do something simple but powerful. I would start small conversations, not long talks, not perfect sentences, just small, real interactions. As I walked out of my place, I saw a neighbor near the door. Before, I would have stayed quiet and just walked away, but this time I stopped for a second and said, "Hi." It was a small word, but it was a big step. The neighbor smiled and said, "Hi." Then I added, "I am new here." He responded with interest and asked, "Where are you from?" The question was simple, and I answered, "I am from my country. I came here to study." It was not a perfect sentence, but it worked. The conversation did not last long, but it was real. It gave me a small boost of confidence that stayed with me as I continued my day. Later, I went to a cafe again, but this time my mindset was different. I was not just there to order coffee. I was there to practice speaking. When it was my turn, I looked at the person at the counter and spoke clearly. "Hello, I would like a coffee." My voice was more stable than before. The person asked something, and I understood enough to respond without asking again. That felt like progress. Then I added one more sentence, something I had not done before. I said, "This place is very nice." It was a simple compliment, but it opened a small connection. The person smiled and said, "Thank you." That moment showed me something important. Conversations do not have to be only about needs. They can also be about connection. As I sat there, I watched other people. They were not speaking perfectly all the time. They were speaking naturally. They were making small pauses. They were using simple words. This observation changed my thinking again. Fluency is not about perfection. It is about comfort. And comfort comes from repetition. In the afternoon, I had another chance to practice. I went to a small store to buy something. When I reached the counter, I said, "Hello." The cashier responded, and we exchanged a few simple sentences. This time, I tried to stay present. I did not rush. I listened carefully. I responded slowly. The conversation was short, but it felt smooth. I did not feel the same fear as before. I felt more in control. Then something interesting happened. A person behind me asked me a question. It was unexpected. For a second, I felt that old hesitation, but it was weaker now. I listened carefully and caught the main idea. Then I answered simply. The person understood me. That moment was powerful. It showed me that I was not only responding anymore, I was also part of the environment. I was part of the communication around me. As the day continued, I started enjoying these small interactions. Each one was like a small exercise. Each one was building my confidence slowly. I realized that I did not need long conversations to improve. I needed many small conversations. That was the key. In the evening, I met a few classmates again. This time, I did not wait for them to speak first. I started the conversation. "Hi, how was your class?" It was a simple question, but it created a response. They answered, and we talked for a few minutes. I did not understand every word, but I understood enough to stay in the conversation. I asked another question. "Do you like this city?" They answered again, and the conversation continued. This was a big moment for me. I was not just answering anymore. I was asking. I was leading. This is a very important step in learning. When you start asking questions, you take control of the conversation. You guide the direction. You reduce pressure because you are not only reacting, you are also creating. I noticed something else too. People were not focusing on my mistakes. They were focusing on the meaning. They were interested in the conversation, not in correcting me. This made me feel relaxed. It removed the fear of being judged. It allowed me to speak more freely. As I walked back home that night, I thought about everything that had happened during the day. I had spoken many times, not perfectly, but actively. I had started conversations. I had responded to questions. I had asked questions. I had stayed present. This was real progress. I also understood something deeper. Confidence is not something you wait for. It is something you build. And you build it through action, through repetition, through small steps. If you are watching this and thinking that your English is not strong enough, remember this. You do not need to start with big conversations. Start with small ones. Say hi. Say thank you. Say how are you. Ask simple questions. Repeat these interactions every day. Slowly, they will become natural. Slowly, your fear will become smaller. That day, I did not become fluent, but I became comfortable, and comfort is the beginning of fluency. Chapter 10. Now I can speak. By the time I reached the end of my first days in New York, something inside me had changed in a way that I could feel clearly, but could not fully explain at first. The city was still fast. People were still speaking quickly. Situations were still unpredictable. But I was no longer the same person who had stood in front of the mirror before leaving home, repeating simple sentences with a shaking voice. I was still learning. I was still making mistakes. But I was no longer afraid to speak. That was the real difference. And that difference did not come from one big moment. It came from many small moments that I did not avoid. I started thinking about everything that had happened since the beginning of this journey. The embassy, the airport, the airplane, the arrival, the city, the campus, the silence at night, the small conversations. Each step had given me something. Not perfection, not advanced vocabulary, but something more valuable, real experience. I understood now that English is not a subject that you finish. It is a skill that you live. And the more you live it, the stronger it becomes. There was a moment that made this clear to me in a very simple way. I was walking on campus when I saw a new student standing near a building, looking confused and checking his phone again and again. I recognized that feeling immediately because I had felt the same way just days ago. Without thinking too much, I walked toward him and said, "Hello. Do you need help?" My sentence was simple. My voice was calm. He looked at me and said, "Yes, I am looking for this classroom." He showed me the room number. I looked at it, and for the first time, I did not feel lost. I knew the place. I knew the direction. I said, "Go straight, then second floor, then left." He smiled and said, "Thank you." And I replied, "You're welcome." That moment stayed with me. It was not a big speech. It was not a perfect sentence. But it was real. I had moved from asking for help to giving help. I had moved from fear to function. This is the transformation that matters, not from beginner to perfect, but from silent to active. I realized something very important in that moment. Fluency is not about speaking without mistakes. Fluency is about not being blocked by fear. It is about being able to express your idea, even in a simple way, and continue the conversation. When I first arrived, I thought I needed to sound advanced to feel confident. Now I understood that confidence comes from using simple English again and again until it feels natural. As I continued my days, I started speaking more freely. I did not wait for the perfect sentence. I did not stop myself because of small mistakes. If I did not know a word, I used another word. If I did not understand something, I asked again. If I made a mistake, I continued speaking. This mindset changed everything. It removed pressure. It created flow. I also learned to listen differently. At the beginning, I tried to understand every word, and that made me tired and confused. Now I listened for meaning. I listened for key ideas. I connected words with actions and situations. This made listening easier and more natural. I stopped fighting the language, and I started moving with it. There were still moments when I did not understand. There were still moments when people spoke too fast. But now, those moments did not stop me. They became part of the process. I accepted that not understanding everything is normal. Even native speakers do not understand everything all the time. This realization gave me peace. Another important change happened inside my mind. I stopped comparing myself with others. At the beginning, I looked at people who spoke better English and felt small. Now I looked at my own progress. I saw how far I had come in a short time. I saw how I had moved from fear to action. This shift in focus made me stronger. Growth is personal. It is not a competition. If I speak to you now, not as a student but as someone who has lived this journey, I want to tell you something very clearly. You do not need to wait to become perfect before you start speaking. That moment will never come. You become better by speaking. You become confident by using the language in real situations. You become fluent by staying active, not by staying silent. There are a few principles that changed everything for me, and they are simple but powerful. Speak simple sentences. Do not try to sound advanced. Ask when you do not understand. Do not guess blindly. Listen for key words, not every word. Use your environment. Show, point, and act when needed. Practice real situations, not only grammar rules. And most important, continue even after mistakes. These are not theories. These are real tools that work in real life. Looking back, I feel grateful for every difficult moment. The confusion at the airport, the pressure at the embassy, the fast speech in the city, the silence at night. All of these moments were not problems. They were teachers. They forced me to grow. They forced me to adapt. They forced me to become stronger. If you are still at the beginning of your journey, I understand your fear. I understand your hesitation. I understand the feeling of not being ready. I felt all of that, but I also know something you may not know yet. You are more ready than you think. You already know enough to start. You already have the tools to communicate. You just need to use them. Do not wait for confidence. Create it. Do not wait for perfect English. One conversation can change your mindset. One step can start your journey. Now, when I say, I can speak, I do not mean that I know everything. I mean that I am not afraid to try. I mean that I can communicate. I mean that I can live in English, and you can too. Your journey may look different. Your city may be different. Your situation may be different. But the process is the same. Speak, listen, try, learn, continue. That is how you grow. That is how you become confident. That is how you truly learn English. And this is where your real journey begins. You made it to the end, and that tells me something important about you. You are ready to change. Remember this clearly. You do not need perfect English to start speaking. You need action. You need courage. You need consistency. Every time you speak, you grow. Every mistake makes you stronger. Do not wait for the right moment. This is your moment. Start speaking today and keep going no matter what. Thanks for watching this video. and I will see you in the next video.